Welcome to the midterm sales letter. I am going to just be going over some general components of the midterm that are important for you to understand in order to be successful while writing it. So, just a few requirements. I also will post this presentation for you. It is a 4 to 5 page assignment in length. Remember, everything we write in this course is single spaced, and this specific assignment is formatted in a letter. So just be mindful, 5 pages in length. It also has to meet a minimum requirement of 2,500 words. These requirements, these length requirements, do not include your works cited page. So it's quite literally just the writing you're doing for your midterm sales letter. It should address a very specific person by name. This is your patron. Many of you at this point have narrowed your funding source down to a foundation, an organization, something like that. You want to make sure that you are finding the proper individual to whom you should write this letter within that organization or foundation. You need to write it to a human being, and it needs to be one person. So if any of you need help with that, let me know. Generally speaking, it's a person who's in charge of grant writing or grants at that foundation, or someone who's in charge of funding in general. It should explain and define the current problem that you've chosen, especially in regards to your specific population. By the time we're done reading the midterm, the problem section should be so clear and thorough, as well as your population section. Your research, you should be getting into it at this point, but it's very normal if it's not 100% done, or if you're feeling like you really need another model of success or a piece of theory. That's totally normal for the midterm, but just know that you do need some models of success. It should explain that current problem, like I said, but going further beyond that, your audience really should be very convinced that the problem exists and really needs to be addressed with some sort of immediacy, so there should be an urgency behind it. You are just making sure that you are following APA formatting guidelines, and it should close with an invitation to your oral presentation. They are not scheduled yet, but they will be within the next few sessions. Please be mindful that obviously your patron won't actually come to your oral, but hypothetically speaking, they would, so that's why you're inviting them. Guys, this is very important. You need at least 8 sources in your work cited. I know for your white papers, a lot of people had less than that, and that's very normal. So some of you may be needing to find more relevant sources. You can have more than 8, that's perfectly fine, but at least 8. Whatever your total source count is, half of those sources have to be scholarly and peer-reviewed. So just be mindful. You want to really just double check this in the library system when you're doing your research. Make sure that in that left-hand column of that library page that you're checking off peer-reviewed or scholarly, and that will guarantee that you are finding those sources. If you do not have enough scholarly sources, that could result in you failing the paper. This is a very short video. I'm not going to show it to you, but I will post it for you. It's a small TED Talk, and it's about Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. So it goes over ethos, pathos, and logos. Maybe you learned that in high school. It's a pretty popular thing to learn like your junior year in English classes. But it talks about the 3 elements of persuasion that Aristotle talks about in his book of rhetoric, and why including all 3 elements is essential to make whatever you write a persuasive piece. So please watch this in your free time. I will post this video for you. Just to follow up from that video, there is a graphic organizer that I've given you here. This is just helpful in remembering these, especially if you need a refresher. So just a very, very quick refresh. Logos is using logic to persuade your audience. So oftentimes logic will mean that you're using data points or statistics, which would create a logical argument for your reader to follow. Next might be pathos, and that is the emotional connection to your audience. So if you're ever watching TV and you see those commercials that are asking you to donate to help animals who are suffering from abuse, you would see that there's really sad music in the background. They give you really horrible statistics. They show you images of the dogs and they really look like they're extremely sad. That's really playing off of that emotional connection to persuade us to donate. Lastly, we have ethos, which is really focused on reputation and credibility. So that would be your use of scholarly sources. So if you're using those scholarly sources, those are our most credible sources. So if you're using a lot of those to back your argument, that would make your argument more credible. So just refer to this if you need it. All right, so just continuing with some of the requirements for that midterm sales letter. It should adhere to proper letter formatting. I'll go over that in a few slides. It should discuss, document, and quantify your problem in a thoughtful and analytic manner. I oftentimes will have students who just kind of summarize the problem. The key thing here is that you're analyzing it and really taking it a step further regarding your interpretation. It should highlight and cater to the reader's concerns about the topic. So dependent upon who you've chosen for your patron, you really should be thinking, what does their foundation stand for? What does this person care about? And you should try to persuade them based off of their interests. It should also cite specific examples from your research. So you want to make sure that you're integrating your quotes and that you're using them decently, but you don't want to overuse quotes. I always tell students you should have about 10% of your paper that's quoted. So when you go to submit it, you'll get a Turnitin report on Canvas, and you can actually click that report, and your percentage should really be around 10% or less. So any of you can reach out if you have questions about that. It should very briefly propose a plan and provide the rationale for it. Remember, the rationale is your paradigm section. It's your models of success, other places that have faced a similar issue and that have figured out ways to fix it, and that there's research to prove that they've been successful, as well as pieces of theory. Overall, the tone of it should convince your reader to listen and to want to hear more. We talked about this, but you need at least 8 sources in your works cited, and it should be APA style. A lot of students ask if you need the annotations in your works cited. You do not. That was just for the annotated bib. So your source list can just be a list of your sources alphabetized and in proper APA formatting. Please make sure that you're proofreading. We will be doing a lot of peer editing. All right, so there are 3 main purposes for this assignment. One is to give you an opportunity to organize your research in a really meaningful way that helps you achieve a goal, which is solving that problem. Your midterm is an evaluative tool. So I'm telling you, I spend a ton of time giving you feedback on your midterm. It's probably the one assignment that you get the most feedback on, and it's so you can grow that midterm paper into your final paper. So hopefully that's a helpful thing for you. This is also an exercise in persuasive writing, and that's something that will help you not only in this class, but in so many other areas of your future, in your career, in your personal life. Persuasive writing is extremely valuable. So I just want to go over where students normally have a lot of issues and struggle, just so you can try to avoid the same pitfalls. A lot of times people address a very big organization. Like I said, you need to be addressing a specific person. You also need a patron that's realistic. Like, I can't tell you how many times in the past few years people have written to President Trump, President Obama, Michelle Obama. Those are patrons that are way too big, and they wouldn't realistically read your proposal. If you're looking at Michelle Obama's Foundation for Kids and helping them make healthier decisions and get in shape and all of that, you might look at her organization and see who's in charge of grants or funding, and then you would write to that person. So please make sure you're not choosing a patron that's way too large. Even choosing like the president of Rutgers, still too large of a patron. A lot of times I'll have students just make assumptions about the problem. You really need cited data and evidence to prove that it's not only a problem, but it's also a problem within your population that you've chosen to focus on. A lot of times I'll have students not cite research properly. Remember, guys, anything you are taking directly from a source goes in quotations and should be parenthetically cited. If you are paraphrasing and it's not common knowledge, you also want to make sure that you are citing parenthetically, even if it's a paraphrase at the end of the sentence. A lot of times I'll have students who have works cited pages that are not attached. They are completely filled with errors, or they are lacking. There's not enough sources. Sometimes I'll have students submit everything. It looks good. Then I go look at that works cited and there are no scholarly sources. And then a lot of times I'll see just a ton of errors throughout. So please make sure you're looking for those. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm actually going to let you look through it on your own. I'll just very briefly go over what it is, but in the textbook, there is a section in chapter 5, which is the midterm chapter, that goes over 14 steps to a strong sales letter. And you'll see that I've listed out notes here that go over those 14 tips. So you can kind of scroll through them. I have all of them listed out and explained, and I've added my own notes as well. So it goes all the way to slide 14. So once again, I will post that presentation. You are more than welcome to go through that on your own. Just a couple of closing thoughts here. Most initial sales letters do a solid job of identifying an appropriate patron to fund the project, defining that population, and trying to understand that problem. Guys, these are your first 3 Ps: patron, problem, population. They need to be thoroughly gone over and extremely well thought out. There should be no issues there. I should read that and I should think they've got it down. The last 3 Ps is where you should have good ideas, but it may not be fully developed yet because you're still doing research. So your paradigm, plan, and price, it's okay if there is some vagueness. So please make sure that you're aware of that. Better assignments, the ones that score higher, will suggest a more coherent sense of the project. And please make sure that all of the 6 Ps must be represented in some way, shape, or form. All right, so just make sure that you're looking when you go through that chapter, ways that you can structure your midterm sales letter. Think about using titles and subtitles. I want you to think about the structure of the paradigm itself, how to close off different sections, how to write a persuasive hook. There will be a lecture on that, and just making sure that your works cited page is formatted properly. So if we go to the textbook, it is chapter 5. You'll see that chapter 5 is extremely important. Please read chapter 5. It goes over different requirements, and you'll see that if you flip through, and just give me a moment while I flip through, there's a ton of information there for you. But this is really important. It gives you sample sales letters, and I always tell students to look at this. So you'll see, okay, here's a student, Sarah. She's actually a real student who took this class, who got her paper published. Here she is writing her paper, and you get an idea of what she's writing about. You can see how she opens it. You can see how it's structured. Here are those use of subtitles. You can see that they're bolded, and you can just see that this is about a 4 to 5 page paper. You can see that there's cited research in it. And then you can also see, as I get to the end, that there is a list of references. So just please make sure that you are aware of that. There should be 2, and that is fine. So if you go after Sarah's, you'll see that we have Ashley's. Just to close it off, just stay tuned because I will be going over an example sales letter. So if you scroll down to the bottom of our course, this isn't published yet, but I want you guys to at least look here. This is one of the better midterm sales letters that I've graded and looked at. So what I've done is I've went through and I've highlighted everything in orange that would count as a data point or a stat, just so you can get a sense of how much is the student writing on his own and how much is he relying on data and stats. I've also labeled every single part of his paper. So a small activity you'll be doing is writing just the intro hook. You'll see his is 2 paragraphs, and then he dives right into his population and problem, and he talks about food insecurity in Trenton. And then he continues with his problem. This is where he starts introducing his paradigm and his models of success. You can see that all of his subtitles are italicized. And then he has his plan, a scarlet push towards improvement. And you'll have to forgive me, I actually scanned this in the wrong order towards the end. So page 4, you should actually just skip this one little part. You'll see that the plan ends, we have the funding, we have that persuasive closing, and then he signs off. And then, sorry about that, that's the works cited page. And then here it is. So just so you know, this is an MLA paper from Business and Technical Writing. Same exact structure as your class. The main difference is APA. So instead of works cited, yours would say references, and that's the only main difference here. You would just be using MLA formatting. So please make sure you take a peek at this and just stay tuned for other lectures.